Hello, welcome to the English Language Learning Podcast. Today's episode is about the bank, the Silicon Valley Bank that collapsed or failed or went under about a month ago. Today is the 10th of April, 2023. Thanks for joining me. Again, just a reminder, uma lembrança, this podcast is intended for people to practice reading, listening, and hopefully producing English. So if you fit, se você cabe em essas categorias, then you are in a welcome place. So again, every episode I will read a little bit, a short piece or section from a news article or something on the internet. You can always find the link and the conteúdo, the content, in the description section on the YouTube channel. So you can follow with me. Você pode anotar e ficar bem focado, escrevendo e lendo comigo. Ou você pode só escutar como qualquer podcast e você pode fazer qualquer outra coisa, né? Pode fazer exercício, pode andar com o cachorro, pode ficar no carro, no trânsito. So it's your choice, it's your escolha, your choice how to listen to this, but it is intended for language learners, specifically Brazilian Portuguese speaking language learners. But everybody is welcome. So the headline today, we will start with Army of Lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. Army of Lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. Sorry for the voice, I'm a little bit sick still. It's been about 2 weeks. Just a 2-week flu. Army of Lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. And one more time for the people at home doing a focused dictation practice. Army of Lobbyists help water down banking regulations. Maybe the least surprising headline I've ever read. Okay, before we start, lobbyists. In Brazil, this is illegal. To lobby the government is when companies pay individuals who usually are ex-politicians, senators, representatives, presidents, whatever, assistants, people who worked in Washington is what we're talking about, lobbyists. People who get paid very kindly big amounts of money to spend all of their time talking to politicians. And in the United States, they literally write laws. Yes, it is not the politicians who write the laws. Most laws are written by groups of people in committees, and each committee has a special focus for different themes. And when they're writing laws, they take meetings with people who are interested, special people, special interested people. And those people basically are told, look, we're too busy. Why don't you, the lobbyist, write the law and we'll endorse it, we'll support it, and we will put our name on it. So when we say lobbyists write rules and laws and regulations or change regulations, it's literal. Literalmente, essas pessoas, os lobbyists, estão escrevendo as leis in Washington, D.C. So again, here we go. Army of Lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. Find the link and the reading, a leitura mesmo, in the description section on YouTube. Here we go. It seemed like a good idea. Oh, Jesus. This is going to be a short but hard reading because it's so stupid. But here we go from the top. It seemed like a good idea at the time red state Democrats facing grim reelection prospects would join forces with Republicans to slash bank regulations, demonstrating a willingness to work with President Donald Trump while bucking many in their own party. That unlikely coalition voted in 2018 to roll back portions of a far reaching 2010 law intended to prevent a future financial crisis. But those changes are now being blamed for contributing to the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank that prompted a federal rescue and has stoked anxiety about a broader banking contagion. The episode offers a fresh reminder of the power that bankers wield in Washington, where the industry spends prodigiously to fight regulation and often hires former members of Congress and their staff or their assistants to make the case that they are not a source of risk to the economy. That's all I will read. There's a lot more details in the article. I believe this article is from ap.com. Let me read the author's name. Too, Brian Slodisco, and Ken Sweet. So thank you to AP for that. There's some more. They mentioned some more things, right? They mentioned the relationship, the way the rollback or the reversão, the reversal, right? Lobbyists being paid tens of millions of dollars, and there's hundreds of these lobbyists, and the lobbyists get money from companies that they represent, and the money from the companies goes to campaign contributions, right? Companies pay the lobbyists, companies pay the politicians in campaign contributions, and the politicians say, perfect, you write the rules then, and we will sign our name as long as we have a check or cash coming into our campaign fund. And specifically, there was a limit or a threshold for banks, right? A specific size of bank is what they were looking at, and they decided that, you know what, we don't want to investigate. We don't want to have any governmental checks or investigation or oversight. And they use the expression financial stress testing, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a test of the ability of a bank to survive a stressful moment financially. For example, taxas, the interest rate, right? Os juros de tirar dinheiro do banco como empréstimo. That is something that would affect how much a bank can survive a rise in interest rates. And there are many other stress tests. And what, to the public, what did these people say to the public? Well, the article says that the sell, right, the pitch to the public was, hey, this is alleviação. This is relief or alleviation for small banks, community banks, banks for farmers, banks for small businesses. These banks have too many regulations. This is coming from bankers. These small banks, it's too difficult for them to operate. These banks and farms and agricultural banks and small business banks. So we need to make it easier for these banks to operate without regulation, right? So this is just a classic. This is a classic. If you're from the U.S., if you're from Brazil, this is a classic. Hey, too many regulations in this industry. We need to make it more simple for the small man, for the small business guy, for the small business owner, for the farmer. We need to make life easier for them. That's the pitch, right? This is a sheep in wolf's clothing, ovelha uh, in the roupa do lobo. But that's all coming up in the next segment. Every episode we do a segment after the reading, depois da leitura, para investigar e resumar o vocabulário. So we're going to look in the next segment at the English, the vocab, the grammar, sometimes the pronunciation, sometimes. And if you have any further or extra questions, you can put them in the comentario, you can put them in the comment section. So in the next segment, all things English. Army of lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. Army of lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. We read a short introduction from the story from AP.com, apnews.com by Brian Slodisko and Ken Sweet. Now we will review all of the English, well, not all of it, but as much difficult and challenging English as we can. So let's start with the title. We mentioned lobbyists and lobbyism, but I'll mention it again. Lobbyists are people who are paid by corporations and industries. Yes, actual entire industries and special interest groups for industries to influence members of government, politicians, people who are supposed to make the laws. They are usually ex-members of the government. Lobistas, filhas, I wrote filhas de puta. So this is illegal in Brazil in this exact form. There's other ways this happens in Brazil. Direct campaign contributions, right? But the lobby person in the middle in Brazil is illegal. In the United States, again, these people are lawyers and ex-politicians and aides. When I say aides, I'm talking about people who are assisting politicians in Washington, literally in Washington, in the Capitol building. So these people have relationships with many different groups because of their time working in Washington. That's why they go to lobbying, because they have contacts, they have relationships, they have leverage and power, and companies know that, which is why the industry exists. There's an entire avenue in Washington that is full of lobbying firms and companies. These are really the worst kinds of people on the planet to a democracy, in my opinion. They're poison, veneno. But we won't go on more about that. To water down, this is from the headline, Army of Lobbyists helped water down banking regulation. So the infinitive, to water down something, to water down rules, or to water down a drink, to water down a message, is to diluir, to dilute, to weaken, to make less intense, to make it not so strong or harsh, right? So you can get a cocktail at a bar and you can take a sip and go, oof. For example, my friends just visited Sao Paulo from Mexico, and their first caipirinha, a primeira caipirinha deles, it was strong. It was very strong. The cachaça was, it was overwhelming and powerful caipirinha. And maybe they did not do this. At least não fizeram isso. Pero, mas, Spanish just infected my tongue. They could have, at least poderia ter perguntado, pedido, por favor, pouquinho mais limão, pouquinho mais açúcar. It's too strong. I need to water down the taste. Diluir. To water down regulations is to make them less intense, make them weaker, mais fraca. Grim, facing grim prospects. This is in the first sentence, first line of the reading of the Leitura. It seemed like a good idea, the diluindo regulations. Red state Democrats, so Democrat politicians in Republican-dominated states, red like West Virginia, like Virginia, like Florida, um, like Nebraska or Wyoming or one of the Dakotas. These are states that are typically Republican, that have some Democrats in different regions, but dominated by Republicans. Red state Democrats facing grim reelection chances or prospects would join forces with Republicans to slash or cut bank regulations. Grim, Grim. This just means not good. It's not looking good. Not looking good. If you look outside and you see dark, dark clouds, maybe some thunder or lightning, you go, oof, look, the weather looks grim today. So grim means not good, kind of dark. To slash, same sentence. They joined forces, red state Democrats and Republicans, to slash, like clash, but with an S, slash bank regulations. Cut, to cut, to cut. A willingness, the same line, the same sentence. They demonstrated, or together they're slashing bank regulations, demonstrating a willingness, a vontade, para trabalhar com President Donald Trump. So a willingness. This is a word that's very frequently, difícil falar or lembrar para brasileiro, because it's very different than vontade. Doesn't look the same, doesn't sound the same, but to be willing is to have a vontade, a desire, demonstrating a desire to work with Donald Trump while bucking, with a B, to be clear, while bucking many in their party. B-U-C-K, to buck. To buck is to resistir. To resistir, to resist, to oppose, to kind of ignore and go, you know what? You're going that way. I know I'm probably supposed to go that way, but I'm going to go this way instead. Think of a horse. Or a bull, right? Torreiro. And buck is when the horse is so wild, so crazy jumping that it bounces, it shoots the person on top off of the horse. So to buck is to basically say, you know what, I don't care what the pressure is to do something. I'm going the other way. And in this case, it was Democrats in Republican states saying, I know the party is supposed to be unified with a message and direction, but we're going to go the other way. We're going to support deregulation of banks. So that would be Democrats ignoring the Democratic Party, which I'm not sure if this happens let me add this question, actually. I'm not sure if this happens in Brazil or to what extent. So I'm writing the question right now. In Brazil, do members of a party often or frequently buck their own party's interests? So let me know. I'll ask the question at the end. In the next segment, we will have a question and conversation. But let me ask it now. In Brazil, do members of their party, for example, a PT member, do they ignore their party frequently? Do members of the PL, PSOL, or whatever the hell, PCdoB, do members, individual politicians, typically or sometimes or never decide, hey, you know what? My interests of reelection are different than my party's. So I'm going to buck or ignore or resist my party's pressure to vote for something or not vote for something. I don't know in Brazil if that happens. Let me take the sweatshirt off. It's a little bit hot in here. I have been here for 4.5 years, but I can't exactly. I know Bolsonaro has done this. He got kicked out of his own party. So that's not surprising that Bolsonaro would be one who does that. But he did that as president, right? So technically, he would be the leader of his party in the U.S. The president is the leader of their party. But I'm mentioning, and in this case, it's not leaders; it's just normal members, unpopular members too, because they represent Democrats in Republican areas. To prompt something. To prompt. This is in the next sentence, I believe. I missed two rows. Do roll back, but we mentioned roll back already. But that unlikely coalition, Democrats and Republicans, voted together in 2018 to roll back portions or pieces of far-reaching 2010 law that was supposed to prevent a future financial crisis. To roll back, phrasal verb. Roll back, two words, R-O-L-L, back. To roll back is to reverse. To reverse. Reverter. Or is it reverter? To roll back. Yeah. To reverse. To go in the opposite direction. So they decided we have regulations that we passed in 2010. Let's go the other way. Let's get rid of those regulations. Let's roll them back. We are now at prompted, so second paragraph. But those changes, those rollbacks, those reversals, reversões, are now being blamed or culpado for contributing to the recent collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank that prompted or necessitated or causou a federal rescue and has stoked anxiety. To stoke something, S-T-O-K-E, like smoke, but with an T, not an M. To stoke, to encourage, to incite, incitar, encorajar, alimentar, aticar, atiçar. So to stoke something, to stoke anxiety is to incite anxiety, to create. To stoke or create anxiety about a broader banking contagion or crisis. Broader would just mean bigger, mais amplo, a bigger banking problem. And it didn't, because the federal government had a strategy here that probably prevented a bigger banking problem. The episode offers a fresh reminder, uma lembrança recente. It's a fresh reminder, uma lembrança recente, of the power that bankers wield. This is a I-E, W-I-E-L-D, like shield, but with a W. Captain America uses a shield to wield power. To wield something is to exercer o poder, to exercise power. That bankers exercise power in Washington. Basically, they use their power. They don't just have it. No one just has power. They use it. So that is all. There's a lot more English. Obviously, the whole article is English. There's a lot more to read. You can read more and ask more questions. If you have doubts, dúvidas, perguntas, pedidos, anything, leave it in the comments or email. Coming up next, questions and conversation. And don't forget, at the end, we do have a new segment. Why does this matter to Brazil? In the next segment. Army of lobbyists helped water down banking regulations. army of lobbyists help water down banking regulations. We read an article or a piece about red state Democrats or Democrats in Republican-dominated areas. Right? Think of a member of the PT que mora, político que mora no Santa Catarina. Right? That would be if we had colors here for parties, but that would be a PT member in a PL state. Red state Democrats are Democrats who operate and are elected in Republican or conservative dominated states. And you could say a blue state Republican. For example, a Republican in California would be a blue state Republican. We have questions now and some conversation about this topic. But again, it was about Democrats teaming up with or joining forces with Republicans to slash or cut bank regulations. And this article comes after the collapse or failure or falla of the Silicon Valley Bank. Lots of Brazilian social media, people were asking, as pessoas nas redes sociais em Brasil estavam perguntando e estava interessado no Nubank, né? E se o Nubank vai falhar por culpa desse banco no Silicon Valley and other companies as well, right? Because there was lots of investors in the bank who were in the tech industry and tech startups. So, first question, do you trust the current banking system? Why or why not? Do you trust the current banking system? Why or why not? And the banking systems in the world are connected. They have some separation. There are some borders, right? Some practices that are allowed in the U.S. are not permitted in Europe. Some practices that are permitted in Europe are not allowed in the U.S. And I can't be more specific than that. I'm in Brazil. I'm talking to Brazilians. So what do you think? The banking system in Brazil is not strong. It's infamously corrupt. But just generally speaking, do you trust the current banking system? Se você confia no sistema de banco atual, por que sim, por que não? Do you have money in the bank or do you buy crypto? Crypto would not be the current banking system. That's a different alternative banking system. Do you have cash under your bed? Do you buy gold? Se você compra ouro, how do you keep your wealth and your money? Do you put it into the bank or not? Do you trust the current banking system? Number two. So for me, yes, I do trust the current banking system as long as we're talking about a savings account at a normal bank. Do I trust them to save my money? Yes. Do I also trust that they will fuck me at any moment that it benefits them? Yes, they will. But I trust that they are reliable. Sometimes they're reliable in fucking you, but they're reliable. The difference with the alternative banking systems, they're unreliable. You don't know what to expect from them, whether or not that's good or bad. You might make a lot of money in one moment, but you also might lose it all in another. So, how worried are you that a bank you are affiliated with might fail in your lifetime? Quanto preocupação você tem que banco no que você está investindo o seu dinheiro pode falhar na sua vida? How worried or preoccupied are you that a bank that you have invested in, your cash, might fail in your lifetime? Personally, not very. I have money invested in American Bank and Bradesco. My American banks are corrupt and the Bradesco is corrupt, but are they going to lose all my money? They might try. They might try to lose all my money. They might do things that are irresponsible. But in the U.S. and in Brazil, there is insurance on money that normal people have in a bank, right? So that is why I am confident. Not because the banks are necessarily safer, they should be, but because the government in the places I live and where the banks exist have rules about, and insurance, they have rules about what banks can do. Those are called regulations. Those can change, though, like in this story, but they also have insurance policies on people who are investing in the bank. Number three, when something like a bank collapse happens, do you pay attention to the causes? Why or why not? When something like a bank collapse happens, do you pay close attention to the causes? Why or why not? Quando alguma coisa acontece, tipo banco falhando, se você presta atenção aos causos, por que sim ou por que não? I'm interested in how much do you care about why something happens. You have your money in a bank. The bank sends a news story that they failed, and or not even your bank, just a bank, right? I'm an American. You're a Brazilian. We're all kind of putting our money in the same system. How much do you investigate why these things happen? In 2008, there's books and studies, pesquisa, livro, documentário, filme. Lots of content has been created and lots of study and research and pesquisa has been invested into 2008 and why it happened. But do you know why 2008 happened? Um, do you have any doubts about why something like that in 2008, it's 2023, it's been 15 years. Do you have doubts or confusion or ceticismo, skepticism about that economic disaster? What about now? How much attention do you pay to the causes of these things that get posted on the news? Um, Next question. From your point of view or perspective, do you get frustrated that a bank collapse in a foreign country, in un país extranjero, could have massive implications for the Brazilian economy? Desde seu ponto de vista ou perspectiva, se você fica frustrada que falhança de banco, uma quebrança de banco em um país estrangeiro pode ter implicações grandíssimas por la brasileiro, pela economia brasileira. How does it feel? Do you get frustrated as a Brazilian that rules and regulations and changing politics in the U.S. or Europe can absolutely fuck the Brazilian economy and your economy, your bank, and your ability to spend and make money? What is that like? I don't have the same feeling. I am from the U.S. I still have very little control over the banks, but I'm from the country that in 2008, caused a massive financial crisis. I'm a voter, a taxpayer in the economy that gave a lot of money to the banks after they failed. You are not. You're from a place where you have to look at the clima and react to someone else always. Brazilian banks don't have the power to dictate how does the world economy go, which direction, and what speed, what velocity. The American banks do, and they wield or use or exercise that power all the time. Also, unintentionally, right? For example, the Silicon Valley Bank fails because people in a region of my country were ambitious, but that affects the economy in the world. How does that feel for you, a Brazilian? What are your thoughts and feelings and opinions about lobbying? O que são seus pensamentos, opiniões, sentimentos sobre lobistas? It's illegal in Brazil. Should it be? Should it be legal just so it's in the open and transparent? Although it's not transparent in my country, it's transparent enough to know that it's always happening, but it's not so transparent that you know when exactly it's happening. You always know after, and you can always make an assumption about atualmente, about now, but you know, and it doesn't really matter if you know or don't know because it exists, and any individual voter will lose to a lobby. What can you tell me about the public narrative about deregulation in Brazil? O que você pode me dizer sobre a narrativa pública sobre deregulação no Brasil? I know that it's been a common topic in the news in under Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro has promoted deregulation of industry in general, especially in the Amazon and agriculture and in banking. I know that Lula has been against that and wanting to nationalize certain companies and industries where Bolsonaro had changed that reality. So, what about you in your perspective, and how do you think Brazilians think about deregulation? Another one that was recent with Lula, video games, esports, and contract work like Uber drivers and iFood. So what do you think about that? What is the narrative in Brazil about that? Is the public typically pro or for regulation, or are they typically against or in opposition to regulation? And the next question is the same, but what do you think about deregulation of industries and markets? Specifically you, what are your opinions and feelings and experience with deregulation of industries and markets? And our last question, in Brazil, which I read this question already because I wrote it while we were doing the episode. In Brazil, do members of a political party often, frequently, or never buck their own party's interests, resist their own party's interests? Às vezes, ou no Brasil, os membros de um partido, com frequência, nunca ou às vezes, resistir aos seus próprios partidos, os interesses dos seus próprios partidos. And this is when we talked about red state Democrats deciding that it was politically advantageous or good, for them to vote with Republicans and Donald Trump. That was a political calculus that they made to go against the interests of their own party. Does this happen in Brazil often? We mentioned, and I don't really mean from the president. I mean from a member of Congress, a member of the Câmara. Finally, our last segment, our news segment. Why does this matter to Brazil or to a Brazilian person? Shit flows downstream. Shit flows. Merda se muda, né? Viaja. Shit flows. Especially in the banking system. Shit flows down. Wherever the money is being played with, at the highest stakes, where people think they have the best chance to make the most, and that would be Wall Street in this case. And if they fuck up, that mistake, esse erro, vai viajar o mundo inteiro, right? Lobbyists and lobbying in the USA is affecting the safety and security of banks and markets that stretch across the world, and industries, and people's banks, people's houses, people's ability to buy food. And we have an expression in English, and we'll end on this. We, the United States, are writing checks that your ass will have to cash. Not us, as in the bankers in the US, but other people in other parts of the world. We're writing checks that your ass will have to cash. And on that note, we will end this episode. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening this long, if you even made it this long. Fuck the bank, right? And I hope you inscriver, subscribe. I hope you leave a comment, a like, or a dislike, whatever. Any engagement is good for the podcast. And if it's good for the podcast, if you're listening, it's good for you. So, muito obrigado por escutar. E eu espero, eu desejo que você inscreve, subscribe e seguir.